Everyone, welcome into this week's My Weekly CBS Fix. I hope you had a wonderful week. In this week's Haftarah portion of Parshas Noach, we again read from the book of Isaiah. Isaiah speaks a lot about the future prophecies of Moshiach. May we merit soon to greet Moshiach. But the Navi, the Haftarah opens up and says, Rani akar le'yalada, rejoice, you barren one that didn't have children, meaning the Jewish people at one time were like they didn't have children. They were very small in number, like the verse says, Ki atam hama'at mikol ha'amim, because you are the smallest of all the nations. But in the future, when Moshiach comes, will be larger than all the nations. The prophet also says that at one point in our history, Hashem was very wrathful against us, very angry at us, but when Moshiach comes, it'll be the exact opposite. And another thing that it says is, Ki boshes alumayich tishkachi, the embarrassment of your youth you will forget. Now, what is the embarrassment of our youth? The embarrassment of our youth was two things. First of all, in our youth, meaning when we were small and young, before Moshiach came, we used to sin. And unfortunately, what is sin? Sin is exactly what distances us from Hashem. And that itself is our undoing, and we have ourselves to blame. But in the future, when Mashiach comes, there'll be such clarity and such clear knowledge of Hashem that that's all we'll be interested in. Nobody will be interested in following earthly pursuits or the desires of the body, but rather sin won't even be on our radar. And so therefore, that's another facet of our existence when Mashiach comes. Now, the verse continues to say, as opposed to during the times of Noach. Now, the flood came, and it obliterated everybody. But even after the flood was over, there was still judgment on the world. There was still illness that eventually took place. That's because eventually people started to sin. Whereas during the times of Mashiach, nothing will happen anymore. It'll be song and dance. It'll be wonderful. Another reason why we were embarrassed, the embarrassment of our youth, is that a lot of times people, before Mashiach came, they didn't really believe in Hashem. And they were also embarrassed to be a Jew. And in the future, that will all be forgotten, because like we said before, there'll be such clear knowledge. Everybody will clearly see what should be. You'll be embarrassed that you were embarrassed, because it's obviously so clear that there is Hashem, and obviously it's so clear now to you that the Jewish people received the Torah at Mount Sinai, and that we were always Hashem's people, and that we should have worn the crown of being Jews with pride. And instead, we try to hide it instead. And so therefore, that was our undoing. And in the future, when Mashiach comes, we'll see that everything will be the exact opposite. Like I said, hopefully one day we'll merit to greet Mashiach, and we'll be able to have that enjoyment. But just one last thing we have to remember, that when we study everything that has happened, even to the Jewish people in their history, that itself is kind of a testament to our history. As the verse says, when the nations of the world used to rise up against you, Hashem says, it wasn't with me. Whoever rose up against you, they will fall before you. And what that means is, a lot of times throughout history, when the Jewish people were attacked, they were attacked by great nations, whether it was the Romans, whether it was the Greeks, whether it was Germany. But Hashem says, when they rose up against you, Efes Me'osi, was without me, which means even though Hashem kind of sent them, it wasn't really Hashem's will that the Jewish people should die or perish or be persecuted. It was the plan of the Jewish people, of the non-Jewish people, to rise up against us. But Hashem, at the same time, the Navi, the prophet, promises us that those people that rose up against us, they will die in their own countries. They'll die and they'll pass away. And we see that these aforementioned nations are no longer around. And so when if we just study so many of the words of the prophets, we see how many things have come to fruition. And there's so many other things in the Torah that clearly tells us that Torah cannot have been written by a regular human being. And so therefore, instead of being embarrassed in the future, let's be excited right now that we realize the truth of the Torah. That way we can greet Mashiach without any embarrassment. Hopefully we'll greet him one day soon. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Thank you for listening.